section, I want to run through just kind of a Thrive spiel in case anyone entering the room isn't super familiar with us. So just to give you kind of a visual overview of some of the things we do a lot, so it's hard to capture on a couple of slides. This is kind of a visual and a little bit more of a granular picture of what we do. This is what some of our programs include. So our Strategic Alliance Initiative, it's something that was designed for the pandemic to kind of collect that in-depth data that we really needed across the nonprofit sector. That helps us strategize our recovery plans. So this is something that we're continuing to do. We just sent out another survey to collect more data for our next report. Just going to speed right through these. Thrive Rise, it's our COAD for San Mateo County. If you're not familiar with what a COAD is, it stands for Community Organizations Active in Disaster. So this is in case of a disaster or emergency. This helps mobilize nonprofits and faith-based community organizations to work in tandem with local government. And that's to reduce sort of the duplication of efforts and maximize those resources. We have a lot of trainings that are free and local, welcome everybody in the space. And we also have a Thrive Rise newsletter that kind of showcases what's going on, all of that pertinent information that you should know, and talks about those trainings. This is an overview of our tags. I won't go through all of these. I think probably most people on this call are familiar with these already, our Thrive Action Groups, but I do want to specifically shout out our Partnerships in Education Summit that's tied to our Children Education tag. Our next summit is coming up on February 15th. We're really excited for that. And like I mentioned about our Thrive Rise newsletter, we have a bunch of other newsletters that come out very frequently and consistently. So Thrive Weekly is our weekly newsletter, and it kind of showcases everything happening with Thrive, all of our upcoming events, as well as community and nonprofit announcements, what's going on with other nonprofits and events that are available through them. Thrive Star is something we send out less regularly, but it's kind of our bigger newsletter, and that's kind of our bigger organizational updates with Thrive and our happenings, and also the bigger announcements for nonprofits and kind of local news that you should be aware of. Job board is something that also gets sent out regularly. This is where you'll see open job positions, and if you are a Thrive member, you can post your job positions here. And I mentioned Thrive Rise, our policy and advocacy newsletter comes out monthly, and that is something that features all of the advocacy news that you should be aware of, and also is kind of our updated information resource with what we're doing in the space as well. Very quickly, again, I'm trying to speed through this because I know that this is an event that's going to have a lot of questions come up, but I just want to go over very quickly our membership and kind of what that looks like, what that offers. So this is something that we're very proud of and kind of represents the best, we believe, of the San Mateo County nonprofit sector, public sector, philanthropic, corporate. And if you are a member, what that provides you, or what that includes, is you're able to attend exclusive events and connect with other nonprofits and businesses, individuals, civic leaders, and that includes free tickets to our Leadership Circle luncheons, which happen quarterly. So that's just an example of one of those exclusive events, somewhere where you can connect with nonprofit executives. We also share very important organizational updates and event announcements for other nonprofits, like I mentioned with our weekly newsletter. And this is an opportunity that's free for Thrive members. So that's something that we normally charge for, our job board and Thrive Weekly announcements. And that's completely free and something we offer every single week for Thrive members. And this is also just an opportunity to participate in advocacy in general and impact your nonprofit, local nonprofits, communities, and that includes increasing outreach and education for elections, which is very timely and leads me to my next topic, which I just want to briefly go through our upcoming events at Thrive. So our first upcoming event is on January 17th, our voter outreach training. So this is a session that will teach you kind of the how, why, what, when, where of effective voter engagement. And this is something, again, that's open to everyone and is going to be a valuable resource for voter education, and we'll give you some information about our election education toolkit. We are also co-hosting an event with SBCN as part of our advocacy series. So this one is on transforming nonprofits into effective change makers. And what that means is essentially there's a common misconception about nonprofits that they can't participate in advocacy or lobbying. But this will give you kind of the right tools and information that will allow you to make policy advocacy work for you and your organization and your community. And then we also have candidate forums coming up very soon. So our first one is going to be on January 30th, and that's going to be at the City of Menlo Park Council Chambers. We're co-hosting this with Leadership Council of San Mateo County, and this is going to be where the candidates from District 4, as you can see on the screen, they're going to be coming in to answer your questions. So questions from the community, from nonprofit leaders. And this is just, again, an opportunity to get an understanding of where these candidates stand on the issues that you actually care about. And this is an opportunity to get your questions answered and your voice heard. As part of our COAD, our next Thrive Rise monthly meeting is going to be a little bit special. This is an introduction to cold impacts on health in counties' inclement weather program. So cold weather is something we're obviously experiencing this time of year, and it's getting more intense as the years go by, and can result in poor health outcomes and even death for those that are unhoused or otherwise lack proper heating resources. So this is targeting individuals who are most at risk for hypothermia, are most experiencing homelessness, older adults, people with inadequate food and heating resources. And this will be a meeting with representatives from the County of San Mateo Health and Human Services Agency, where you can learn more about kind of how the cold impacts the human body, how social vulnerability exacerbates these risks, and the county's inclement weather program, and what it's doing to expand shelter and availability for unhoused individuals and cold nights. Our next candidate forum will also be in February. This is something we are co-hosting with Choose Children, which is a project out of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So this will be a county-wide conversation with candidates for the county supervisor, and they're going to be solely discussing critical children's issues. So if that's something that impacts you directly, something you are passionate, care about deeply, this is kind of the candidate forum that you shouldn't miss. This is another event with Thrive Rise. This one is on coordinating staff roles in disaster. So an introduction to incident command system for nonprofits. The incident command system is the framework that emergency workers use to efficiently organize and manage response efforts during disasters. So this is a 2-hour in-person training workshop that will give you a background on what ICS is and how to adapt that for your nonprofit. Okay, I'm going to slow down a little bit, kind of get us resettled, and I just want to give you a very brief overview of our speaker, Cherian, and I will stop sharing so that we can see each other. I'm very excited to have Cherian here. He is, sorry, let me find my title. It's a very long one, but very impressive. Certified fundraising executive, chartered advisor in philanthropy, and vice president of development for the nonprofit Merit America. And he's going to give you an overview and understanding of AI, how that's impacting the nonprofit sector, how you can be part of that impact and change, and kind of the ethical considerations that come with that. And we are also going to go through a more interactive preview of these tools. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Cherian to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for being here on what I would assume is a warm Tuesday morning for many of you. I am calling in from Des Moines, Iowa, where it is about 30 degrees and we have a foot of snow outside. So that cold weather conversation is near and dear right now. I am thrilled to be able to be here and talk about AI in particular for your organizations. And what I want to kind of level set with you about is that the fact that you all are kind of closer to the epicenter of AI is not lost on me. I think the key is that what's happening in AI doesn't necessarily translate very clearly into what's happening in our organizations or our day-to-day practice. So really what I want to do is spend some time connecting the dots, maybe dispelling some concerns that you all have. But I also really want to talk about what are some opportunities and concerns, show you some of the tools that I've been using as in the nonprofit sector, helping organizations that I consult with or organizations that I volunteer with, and how we're using some of those tools, whether they're specific for nonprofits or not. This is really for you. So for the next 45 minutes, I'll be chatting with you. But if you have specific questions that you want answers to, please do feel free to throw them in the chat. I've got the window open. I'd be happy to answer them as we go through this process. So for the last 25 years, I've spent in nonprofit organizations, typically in a fundraising role. And then during the pandemic, I built an AI tool specifically for nonprofits. So I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who's come from the AI or from the nonprofit world, dipped their toe into building an AI tool. And then at the end of last year, actually selling that tool, we had a successful acquisition. And so now I'm part of a company that's integrating that with their other tools. And we'll talk about that at the end here as well. So with that in mind, here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to briefly, very briefly, not in a lot of depth, but cover what is generative AI so that we're all on the same page when we're talking about it. And then really going to spend the most amount of time around the benefits and use cases of AI. I do want to spend some time on the risks and challenges, and then really get into your questions in particular. But one of the biggest things that I hear when I'm speaking to nonprofits and nonprofit communities all across the country, and in fact, all around the world, is AI coming for our jobs? Are we going to be out of work? What's going to happen to nonprofits? How are funders going to respond to this situation? And in reality, what I want to kind of reinforce to you all is that AI isn't one thing. And I think a lot of us are familiar with ChatGPT. Even if you're not using ChatGPT, you're familiar with it and its impact on sort of the society that we're all engaged with. And so whether it's the writer's strike in Hollywood, or whether it's, some kid building something in AI in your local high school, there's an element of AI that's inescapable. And it's very, very different from some of the other, dare I say, trends or fads that have happened in the nonprofit sector. Not to dismiss or minimize some of the technology elements that have happened in our sector over the last 10, 5, even couple of years, but you can decide whether to interact with NFTs and blockchain. You can't really decide to interact with AI because of its ubiquity. You could decide whether to really enhance your usage of it, but AI has everything to do with how we interact with the internet, how we interact with devices, how information comes into your organization, and how it's being used outside of your organization. I'll touch on some of those things as we move through the space, but I do want to kind of clarify that as I think about AI, I don't want to minimize our discussion to ChatGPT. I think that very much oversimplifies the discussions, and the arguments for or against OpenAI don't reflect the length and breadth of AI generally. And then I also want to be clear about AI doesn't mean one thing in your organization. It doesn't mean we allow the robots to take control and they do everything and we do nothing. What I like this quote from Robin Bordoli, who says that it's really about machines augmenting humans. I heard someone talk about it as a cyborg a couple of days ago. I don't know that I love that analogy because that sort of creeps me out. I don't think we want like robots attached to our human person necessarily, but I do like the idea of how are we enhanced by automation, by technology, by artificial intelligence, so that we can do the things that we really love to do, the things that really authentically make us human and our human interactions with other humans that drive so much of what social impact really means. Talking about, for example, people who are unhoused or going through the experience of hunger or something like that. This is messy work that requires real human understanding and human interaction. There are pieces of that that only we can do. There are only things that we can relate to with regard to the people that our organization serves, but also on the other side of that, the people that are contributing to our organization on the fundraising side. So where can we kind of leverage that in moving from what we have known in the past as software as a service to what I'm calling technology as a sidekick? How can we get a robot that's sitting behind us and helping us do the things that we don't necessarily love to do, but are actually helping us get to the things that we do have passion for? So before we get into that, I do want to talk about kind of generative AI. And the idea here is not necessarily that you're reading through this slide, but that you get a sense of how the information comes together. There's a lot of misinformation, particularly coming from the nonprofit sector, around what AI is. And I think it's really frustrating, it's really problematic around how people talk about generative AI in particular. So I do want to clarify a bit of this. In general, what generative AI does is it takes in content. So imagine, for example, a bunch of text or a bunch of images or something like that, and it puts it into a database, and then it maps the elements of that database. So if you put in a bunch of English literature, for example, like classic English literature, the style of writing is going to be relatively similar. It's going to be very different from like Middle Eastern literature or Asian literature. And what that network is going to do is map the connections between the information that's inside of that database. So OpenAI has a very large database. That's why it's called a large language model. It scraped a whole bunch of stuff from the interwebs and a bunch of other content and put that together and then mapped those connections. And so then what you are doing is inputting a prompt. You're asking it sort of like autocomplete on your phone or in email. You're asking it what's most likely to come next, and it's filling that out. But instead of filling out, autocorrecting on your text messages or something like that, it's actually producing longer form content, whether a paragraph or a page or something like that, or in some cases, an image, a website, a song. All of those things are now possible, and it's outputting generated content. So where the misinformation comes from inside of our sector is people not fully understanding what this means and saying things like, well, it's not producing the right information. It's not designed to be a source of truth. It's not designed to find, in general, large language models are not designed to produce scientific, academic information for you. So if you asked it, for example, we'll get to this when we talk about risk. If you asked it, for example, is butter a good engineering material? It will create content that's designed to come up with the next right word. It's not assessing whether or not this is truthful, useful information. Now, are there ways around that? Is there a way to get closer to truth? Absolutely. But that's really where we need to be mindful of the use cases. So a lot of people have said, well, if you put garbage in, you'll get garbage out. This GIGO principle that we've heard before from things like coding or whatnot. There's some truth to that, but in reality, again, the generative AI or any AI context is not a genie. It's not a magic box that is that, you know, if you ask it the exact right question, it will come up with the exact right answer. And so there's a lot of work, there's a lot of pieces around prompt engineering that's designed to help get closer to the content that you want it to. But the idea here is that we need to really understand what we're getting into. And when we do that, the context that's shaping how we use generative AI changes fundamentally. So in that vein, coming back to what I said before, we're not talking about AI sort of as in this Ronco set it and forget it approach where we let it communicate with our donors, or we produce materials without human oversight. We're not necessarily ever going to be there. And I say that with all kind of due respect to my colleagues who are working on getting to that point. I don't think we'll ever be there, particularly in the nonprofit sector, because of how nuanced the conversations are, how nuanced the responsibilities are. So I think there's an element of saying, like, we're never going to get to explicit truth in what we're looking for, and we need to be mindful of kind of how we're approaching it. And I share this slide just to reinforce that this is a long time coming. It's not as though OpenAI distributed ChatGPT and then suddenly, like, everyone who hadn't been working on AI is now suddenly like, oh, whoa, what just happened here? Nobody was really surprised, but for the public accessibility of a large language model. So back in 2009, they were trying to figure out, is this image a cat? Is this image a dog? And, you know, up until recently, that information was not easily accessible because you need to have these large servers with that access to the database. And that's why it was costing OpenAI so much. So happily, you know, for them, Microsoft gave them quite a bit of money to make that available. But as we go back just to, you know, a few years, I guess 1997 was a few years ago, but Garry Kasparov lost to a computer playing chess in 1997. 10, 12 years ago, dark day in my personal history, just because my hero, Ken Jennings, lost on Jeopardy to IBM Watson. The thing to remember is that even though IBM Watson won that final Jeopardy, Watson got the answer wrong. And that was 12 years ago. And, you know, so the key here is understanding, like, even though Watson got the final Jeopardy question wrong, over the course of that, I think it was a 2-day total point affair, as Ken talks about now as the host, right? The idea was he got IBM Watson got most of the questions right, and Ken and Brad did not get as many questions right. So you get the idea there. And then, you know, back in 2023, Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI and integrated it with Bing. So now Bing and Google both have generative AI as part of that. And what we have already seen, and we will continue to see, is some element of AI in workplace emails, in slide decks, in spreadsheets, as you see there, and that will continue to evolve. And this just reinforces my point that to a certain extent, you can't avoid some element of AI. If you are searching through your emails to find the Zoom link for the Thrive Resource Room presentation today, AI has a place in that. AI is solving that problem for you. And you know, even when it comes to photos, right? I pulled this just earlier today. AI knows who my kids are. They know who my dog is. They know my friend Barbara. They know my nephews, even my old boss. So this classification is all done with AI. And so even when we think about, can I not use AI or be limited in my use of AI in my professional life, AI plays a significant role in your personal life and sorting through documents and photos and things like that. So there's an element of all of this that seems sort of magical. And if you remember the Star Trek movie from the 80s, they go back in time to the 80s, and Scotty picks up an Apple IIe mouse and says computer, and talking to the computer to try and get the Apple IIe to do what he needs it to do. And these guys are looking at him, the 80s guys are looking at him saying, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But how often do we just take for granted the ability to talk to our devices and say, hey, Siri, hey, Google? And I'm sure all of your devices are going off right now, and I apologize for that. But this happens so naturally to us, and that all is going to continue to affect how not only do we work personally, how do we engage with our work, but also how your stakeholders respond to things. What are their expectations around interactions with your brand? So is there an expectation that they can chat with your organization or get a question answered in the middle of the night? Or can they find information about what you do or how to solve a problem? And how are you meeting your donors, your stakeholders, people that you serve, where they are? Obviously, lots of different organizations in the room today virtually. So lots of different ways to think about that. So as we dive into the benefits and use cases, what I want to be very clear about is lots of different organizations here in the call, many more who are going to listen to the recording. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to what AI will look like for the sector, or even for the subsectors like arts and culture or health and human services, right? Every organization is going to have different sets of use cases. And even within groups of organizations, like, for example, a performing arts center or a volunteer center or something like that, your organization has a very unique DNA of different groups of people who have strengths and opportunities to adopt different forms of AI to meet you where you are and where your constituencies are. So as you go into this process, I'm going to show you some tools that I think may be useful to you, and I'll give you links to all of those so you can play around with them as well. But the idea here is, don't feel like this is a should approach. Again, I saw some other consultant in the space saying, like, if you're not using AI, you're going to be left behind. That's total BS, folks. That's wrong. And it's not appropriate for us to be saying, like, across every nonprofit, if you're not using AI, you're going to be left behind. It may be appropriate to use certain tools in certain contexts, and may be inappropriate altogether for your organization to do that. But what I want you to leave this section feeling is that you should at least be exploring, based upon your personal values and the values of your organization, what makes sense to explore inside of your organization, what really makes sense for you to assess as part of the overarching tool set that is what you use to do your mission. I would say that many of you probably are using a CRM or some sort of donor relationship management system. You're probably using some content relationship system, whether it's on your website or for social media posting, whatever. But not everyone is, and that's okay. When it comes to CRMs, I'm more on the should. You should be using something like that for maintaining donor information, just because of where technology is and the privacy responsibilities that we have. But you've got to make your own well-formed thoughts and decisions around that. So be mindful of how that plays out. As you're thinking about evaluating those tools within that lens of the values that you personally have, meaning, what are the things that I love to do? What are the things I don't love to do? And then organizationally, what strengths do we have within our organization? What are opportunities for robots to do some of these other pieces? There are kind of three broad categories of generative AI around, like, content writing or content creation, whether those are images or documents. Being able to answer questions, and I want you to be mindful of that being inside your organization, and then outward or public facing, and then really engaging with data. And the reason why I think of it in this spectrum is because some people really love writing copy, or they want to have a really strong, like, human handhold over content that goes out, whether it's emails, websites, direct mail, whatever. Totally understand, totally appreciate that. And because that's their strength, or maybe not because, but as part of that strength set, they may not be awesome at engaging with data. They may not be able to segment data or manipulate data in a way that allows them to create the right segments to do that writing. So I think of these as potentially opposite sides of the coin, where if you love one thing, maybe AI can help you with that other side. And again, like if you have people who really love working with data, you have business intelligence people or data analytics people on your staff, and you really thrive in that space, then maybe content writing is an area where there's an opportunity. All of those things play a part into how we do that. So I'm gonna stop the slideshow, and I'm gonna share with you some of the tools that I love using and engage with. We're going to start with Chat GPT because, of course, that's the one that most people are familiar with. I'm also sharing in the chat the link to a lot, not necessarily the Chat GPT ones, because I'll explain that in a moment, but many of the other tools, so you can try them out, play with whatever. So this is one that I created. If you're familiar with the work of Dr. Russell James, who does a whole bunch around plan giving and legacy giving, he actually gave me permission. So this one's publicly accessible, and it's not in there, but I will keep that up. But it includes all of his books and a bunch of his articles. And this is a really basic one. But if your organization's interested in doing plan giving, one of the questions that you may have are, what are the different types of plan gifts? Rather than going to Google and researching all the different plan gifts, or watching a really long webinar, probably by me or one of my colleagues, where I reference everything that Dr. Russell James is doing, you can just ask the question, what are the different types of plan gifts? And AI will answer that question for you based exclusively on the context of the information that I put in. So I'm using an advanced version of ChatGPT in order to get these answers out of that. But to clarify, it's not pulling out information generally from the web or where else. It's doing the specific work of identifying what information I've uploaded into this. And so while it's doing that, I'm just going to show you really quickly. This is super easy to build. So if you have the advanced version, all you have to do is go into create your own GPT, and then under configure, you can put in a little picture of whatever, but you just upload the documents, and then there's some conversation starters if you want. And then if there's capabilities that you want to create, you can do this. This costs $20 a month in order to be able to do this. I like it just because it solves some of my problems, but I thought it was really cool to kind of play with. So I'm not sure why that's not doing it, but I'm sure it'll come back. People have built lots of different versions of these things. So and they will be available on a Chat GPT store. I think I heard next week. So these are all potentially things that you can buy. So there's one like, create a website or anything. So I have no idea what this is, but so I can't see, since this is someone else's, I can't see what is behind the scenes here, but you can, with a sentence, draft a website inside of OpenAI, and it will create all of that for you. So that's one you'll see here. It's building it as we speak. So it's a very specific use case. It's kind of pre-designed to do what you need it to do. I'm not going to wait for this to finish, but it will actually do all of the coding that you need it to do. So you'll see here, like it's, creating all of this stuff, and it will, it may even ask me questions to be able to do that. If you're writing content and you need to optimize for SEO, again, SEO on the back end, like how Google and other search engines operate, is within that AI post. So let's say, for example, we want to create, I'm just picking their standard one, a post about artificial intelligence in healthcare. You might do one about whatever your organization is. You can, and this is, now that I'm asking it questions, it's doing this essentially for free, but I'm borrowing SEO GOAT as part of that. My guess is that this would be something that would be for sale, but ooh, fun. Like it made an image, of artificial intelligence in healthcare, and then it's going to produce a SEO optimized post as part of that. So the cool thing with all of these pieces is that I can go get a cup of coffee and then come back, and this is all produced for me. I can go do a one-on-one with my teammate, and it's produced the content for me. And now all I have to do is go in and say, does this work? Does this not work? And move on from here. So quite literally, once we're done here, I'm gonna change this question to create a post about artificial intelligence and nonprofits, and then I'll post it on my website, and it'll be, a new image, and you'll get to see that if you go. But it's producing all of that, and I'm sure it's lovely. There are ones which I'm a little bit more nervous about. I haven't tried this, but there's an AI doctor that diagnoses symptoms. So this is not one of them I'm going to try because I'm not excited about it, but it's out there. And so you should just be aware that these are consumer facing, meaning your donors, your stakeholders, your board members, they're all engaging with AI in this way and may be able to, and may have expectations around that. So be mindful of that. Question about copyright is a fascinating one. So worked through that quite a bit with the acquisition of the product that I built. This content that's being developed is almost always plagiarism free, and that's because of how the sequences are developed. OpenAI doesn't have a guarantee on plagiarism or copyright violation, but Anthropic does. So you wouldn't be violating if you're really into not taking copyright issues. There's two sides of it. One is obviously this has scraped the web, it's pulled in like Google Books and things like that. So there's a risk of grabbing sections of word pairs that may violate someone's copyright. This is starting to be litigated, and right now it's really hard to litigate because of how the law is set up. And I'm not a lawyer, but I stayed in a Holiday Inn once. And what my lawyers have told me is that the likelihood of this violating copyright on its own is relatively low, and that your chances of being litigated for using this also really, really low. That being said, if you're trying to copyright content that's coming out of OpenAI, that's a whole different ballgame, and you want to be mindful of that. So if you're writing like an ebook that you want to copyright, I'd be really nervous about that. Like I said before, with risks and whatnot as well, especially when it comes to like healthcare, for example, I would be really nervous about whether, regardless of a copyright issue, are there truth claims that are being made by the AI that are actually, require even more human oversight? And for example, like you can ask ChatGPT questions about legal documents, and does that constitute unauthorized practice of law? Some of my lawyer friends argue that it potentially does. So that's kind of nerve-wracking on its own. One thing that I wanted to mention as well is, so you think about that with a limited set of sources inside of ChatGPT, what could that mean with, again, an internal database of issues? And so Google, if you're using the Google Suite inside of your nonprofit, you might have a bunch of documents that you want to query. And so what this enables you to do with Notebook LM, which is part of the Google Suite, you can include 200,000 words or 20 sources. So imagine, for example, creating notebooks of previous board meetings or program information or whatever, and then being able to create content or ask it questions about a Google Drive or a Google folder. That allows you to create institutional knowledge that allows you to solve the problem of, if you have someone who's new to the board or new to your team and they need to, they have a question about something, instead of searching Google Drive, which was quite a bit, that can be overwhelming. Like was mentioned before, I previously worked at Merit America. We had a ton of content in Google Drive. It was really hard to find, okay, what did we promise google.org for this grant that we got? What did we promise, what was this application for whatever? And Notebook LLM can solve that issue for you. So, certainly explore that, see if that's worthwhile. mostly, again, from an internal use perspective. So there's board history or staffing history or things like that around your programs. I wanted to touch base again around like building websites. This is not one that I would necessarily recommend, but let's do Performing Arts Center because that is easier. Performing Arts. Let's do Performing Arts Education. And we'll do San Mateo, California. The reason why I say I don't necessarily recommend this is because I'm not suggesting this as like you all go to durable.co and build a website, but if you have a really terrible website that you need fixed, it might be a good solution to you. What I really want to kind of reinforce here is that within the 2 sentences that I just said, it's created a website for this organization. I don't love these colors. I don't love this type of dance workshop, acting masterclass, digital marketing campaign, right? And I said test, which is really silly, but it's got a little quote. It's got normally this will have, and if I said like nonprofit organization, it's done this kind of thing to be able to build a very quick website, quite literally within 30 seconds. The reason why I share this is because imagine going through a rebranding or updating your website. You could now do this within minutes or hours to be able to build something like this. And that's where the technology is going in a way that you would enable you to do that very quickly and very easily. I also want to share another tool that I use called fireflies.ai. I'm going to grab something that's not like super personal, or that is super personal and not professional, but I have Fireflies join every Zoom meeting, every Fireflies or every Google Meet that I do. It's automatically configured to do that. It records the meeting, transcribes it, and then allows you to ask questions about it. And so I can see like, okay, we have a conversation about personal lives and whatever. It will then give me action items. So having a follow-up call, want to make an introduction with this person at 100 Black Men of North Atlanta. All of these things are action items that I can then kind of go back and say, what do I need to do? So I had a conversation with my colleague, Ben about the advanced certified fundraising credential that I'm getting, and so or working on. And so it says, here are the action items: review and revise a portfolio, consider how to deal with the oral exam. All of these types of things are really simple and straightforward. But the idea is that if you are doing a board call or even a staff call, where someone is responsible for taking notes, or everybody's sort of responsible for taking notes, we're not necessarily fully participating in the meeting because someone's responsible for taking minutes or doing that kind of work. And instead, we could allow the robot to pay attention to what's happening. And I will tell you, I have used this I've not had a single funder who's had any problem with this. It's sort of ubiquitous at this point, whether it's Otter AI or Fireflies. I like that I can go in and ask it a question. So it gives you some sample questions, but you can ask it whatever you want. And then it will provide an answer based exclusively on the transcript, which is super cool. So imagine being able to do board minutes and format it that way. You can do that within Fireflies, for example. I think you can also do it using Otter. I used Otter pre-pandemic and really liked it. I like the AI tools around Fireflies better, so that's why I switched to that. But I have gone back. We had Walmart as a funder, and I was like, what did they say about this, that it needed to be included in this proposal? And I went back, and you can go in and listen to the recording.
It was pretty good, except for the stomach virus.
So I'm not gonna. You don't need to listen to Ben's stomach virus issues, but the idea is you can listen back to the transcript and you can ask it questions, which is super great from my perspective. Yes, most of these AI tools are paid. I don't think that, besides free ChatGPT, I don't think there's very many of them that are completely free, especially at the point. So you have to kind of figure out which are the ones that you want and where's the value of them. I think the question is around, you know, what ones are you going to pay for more versus which ones are you just going to stay with a free plan. Many of them do have some level of a free plan. So like Fireflies has a free plan. Accio, which is this data tool, definitely has a free plan for sure. So with regard to confidential information, the one thing to note kind of at the outset is that there are very few tools out there that are actually confidential without talking about AI or ChatGPT or anything like that. For example, we're on a Zoom call right now, and last year Zoom updated its privacy policy to say all of the content that we're using right now is actually being transcribed, regardless of whether the content is being recorded, and used to feed their AI model. So just be aware that that's happening this very moment with Zoom, and likely with any of the other tools that are out there. So when you're thinking about like confidential information, what I would be more concerned about is not like the transcription of a conversation. If you're having a fully private conversation, then of course don't record it. I would say conversations with a healthcare provider, conversations with an attorney shouldn't be recorded. Conversations with a donor, not necessarily confidential, primarily because you would personally summarize that conversation and put it into a CRM. That's been done for years in an offline capacity, or you would type up a donor report. Again, keeping that information in an online storage file like Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that has no additional risk, you know, using a tool like Fireflies or anything like that. So that's my take on that. You have to assess kind of where your line of private and confidential is. Some people are like, no information, nowhere. And like, then there's probably no level of AI tool, but I would venture to guess there's probably very few technology tools out there that if you dug into the privacy and confidentiality policy that you'd really be able to use. Like Google Drive, Dropbox, none of those are going to be really appropriate. Like unless you're FTPing information directly to a server, your exposure to privacy and confidentiality is non-zero. So be mindful of that. It's only available to you. So I would review, for example, the Fireflies or Otter privacy policies and whatnot. Certainly no different from a Zoom recording of the board meeting. And then you can delete it and it's permanently deleted from Zoom, Fireflies, Otter, and those types of things. We don't, when I'm on boards, like I'm on the AFP Global Board, we don't record executive session. So everything else, and depending on your laws and state laws and whatnot, and your internal policies, you would want to be mindful of that. But all of the information that if you were to record it in any of these platforms, by and large, are deletable or not accessible outside of your specific user base and whatnot. Again, of course, like, can someone hack Firefly? Sure, but they can hack your Gmail as well, or your Zoom account, as we knew, several times during the pandemic. So kind of leading into that confidentiality, privacy information piece, this may be one where you're like, this is not for me based upon that, but I've been thrilled with Accio. So this is a sample data file. This is not real donor information by any means, but I have had no concern about uploading real donor information. I'm just not going to display it to you all. The cool thing about this is you can ask the database questions and you can clean the database. So let's say, for example, I want to change ST to street in address. This isn't, in this situation, it's not going to, well, actually, in any situation, you do chat data prep here, it's not going to alter the underlying data. It's going to create an additional field to be able to do what you want it to do. But say, for example, you have a really messy database where you have salutations in the first name field, or you have so let's see here. Where did it do this? It should have done it in there. I needed to do capital, so it was looking for that. But say, for example, you have salutations in there, or you have non-standard information, you can use all of those types of, chat to manipulate your data in there. But it also provides you sort of this quick assessment of, like, so for example, 14% of this file is from California, 10% from New Jersey. And then you can do, I'm not going to apply this, but it will say, oh, there were no instances. That's weird. They have other ones here that are standard clean ones. So you can standardize the date columns, remove unexpected nulls, do all of these types of things. And then the cool thing is they have I pay for the predictive model piece, but you can actually produce reports based upon this. So you'll see here the distribution of gift amounts for different fiscal years. There's a histogram, there's a pie chart for gift pieces. And I've built a bunch of these over time, but the fun part is that there's this explore tab. So now you can ask it questions that you have about your data. So what's the average gift amount? It will respond and tell me what the average gift amount is in that data file. It can, based upon what information you have in the data file, it can tell you a whole variety of different things around what that data includes. So in this case, average gift amount is $9,208. What is the average gift in California? And so it'll do these sort of really cool calculations that would take you a considerable amount of time to do, but it would be very easy to do that. And you can ask it really any kind of question. So you can see here, I've asked it, like, what's a 5-year giving summary? And it produced I've actually asked it a bunch of different information around total revenue, number of donors, number of gifts. So, and we can download this and share this with a board, or share this internally to understand things like renewal rates and whatever. So kind of cool from a data analysis perspective. It will do predictive modeling, but I just want to warn you that if you have a very small data set, it's not going to do a great job around predictive modeling, but that's not the fault of the tool. It's how limited data sets function. So just be mindful of that. I've been thrilled by it. I use it quite a bit for organizations that I work with to pull reports. This one, I'm not going to, do much in terms of description, but if you do any sort of video, I can't recommend Descript enough. I would just go to their front page of their website and play this video. I pay for this. And if they asked me to pay 10 times as much, I would pay for it in a heartbeat. You can literally train it on your voice. And then if I mispronounced a word, if I said a word incorrectly, I can just retype over that word and it will say the right word in my voice, or I can change like sections of it. It's just, it's fabulous. I've really loved it. So if you do any sort of video, I highly recommend it. If you do any sort of blogging, like any content on your website, honestly, it transcribes the video content. So you don't even have to use the video. You can use the transcription, clean it up, and then post it directly to wherever you want it to do. I really love it. The other one that I use is Reclaim. I don't use it with my teams, but I think it probably has more value with teams. But basically what this will do is you list out all of your tasks, and then on the calendar, it will move tasks based upon when the priority is, when it's due, how much time you think you need to spend on it. And then it will prevent other people from booking that time in your calendar. So like for right now, I'm presenting, and then I'm going to be working on another webinar later today. So if someone tries to go in my link, it'll say, don't book this time because Cherian's working on this, it won't say what, but it'll say it's working on something else. The last thing I want to share with you very briefly as we close up and then get into any other questions, feel free to start thinking about other questions as we wrap up, is the one that I built that's now part of the iWave software system. So if you're not familiar with iWave, Fundraising Intelligence does wealth screening and modeling using AI as well to develop an understanding of your donor base, as well as help you kind of prioritize which donors you want to look at for monthly giving, major gifts, capital campaigns, planned giving, I used this when at Merit America, really enjoyed it. And so I was thrilled when they came knocking around that. You can also get prospects based upon your nonprofit type. So it was a natural fit to kind of include nonprofit OS as part of that. And so lots of different uses, as you can imagine, around like creating blog posts, creating video ideas, building out direct mail. And then we have an integration with a mail house, so you can send out direct mail if you want to do that. You can also use it to just build out the copywriting framework if you don't want to build that out directly, but it'll produce all of that for you. Events, volunteering, build out an onboarding guide for your volunteers and create a volunteer management plan. All of those are produced. You don't really need to do any, don't need to know anything about how to ask it questions. You just need to know, like, I want a volunteer onboarding guide. And all of the like fundraising content can follow a brand voice. So for example, you can use the voice of your organization, build that in the settings tab, but also build out different personas. So if you want to talk to a persona type, you can do that. And in here, for example, I've got one for a healthcare organization, and then one that I built for Charity Water. So we can select this, and then it will build all of the, for example, fundraising content, like an advocacy appeal based upon that piece here. It's all saved as well and fully editable, which is way different from ChatGPT. So for example, let's say, so I did LinkedIn optimized posts for some organization for January. You can go in here and, Harmony Hall Performing Arts Center. I don't know where that is, but you can go in here and rewrite a section January 1st or expand on January 1st if you wanted to do that. All of this can be shared within your team as well. So multiple people can use different produced content, and you can go back and do that. So you'll see here that really produced a whole like longer content for January 1, which of course you couldn't do for within ChatGPT. The other piece is we've got like chat with documents. So if you have, for example, you're working with a funder, this is the California Digital Equity Plan, I believe. Yeah, California Digital Equity Plan. So it'll summarize that document for you. It'll pull quotes for you. So you can use that to build out funder applications or whatnot. We also use it for individual donor profiles. So if you have iWave, for example, you can use this information to say, what does all that data say about that, and create some talking points for yourself or for a CEO to be able to use that. I find that super helpful. Last thing I want to share with you is the build a campaign. So whether it's end of year, Giving Tuesday, or Plan Giving, you go through a few steps. So I'll show you kind of the finished product here, but you go through a few steps and you ask it, you can just tell it, I want a direct mail, phone call script, text messages, thank you notes, social media, and all does it in one fell swoop. So let's say I just want to add another social media post based upon the campaign brief that I've already created and done. It will just create another Facebook post right here. And then you can immediately deploy all of those. So for example, Facebook one that I've already created, I can just send that to social media and it will post using my own image, or I can pick an image here. So it's been a real thrill to build that out. We're building out even more features to that, which has been really great. As I mentioned before, all of these tools are in, besides the ChatGPT models, the different specific ones are in this link that's in your chat, as well as in the slide deck. So as you're thinking about kind of questions, I want to kind of reiterate the kind of oversimplicity that's out there right now around like AI will do everything. We, never touch anything. I tend to focus on, where do humans play the most important role? How can we prioritize that element? And then make sure that everything that AI creates is overseen by a human, so that it meets the expectations, again, depending on the tool that you use, so that it aligns with what you want to put out there. There are really, I think, 4 big issues when it comes to ethics. The first one is a red herring. I don't think attribution matters whatsoever. I just did a podcast with a colleague around this. You could have 14 consultants write a fundraising appeal, write content for your website, you don't disclose that consultants did that, or even multiple teammates that wrote content for an appeal or whatever. So attribution, I don't think is necessary. The only hesitation that I have about that is around like video or pictures, where because we've gotten so far into how good AI generated pictures can look, it may be appropriate to do some of that. When you're thinking about personal private information, we've already covered that quite a bit. I would be nervous about putting any personal information into a general LLM. If you're using a secured vector database, I don't have as many concerns about that. And if you're using it within some sort of other tool that's SOC 2 compliant, I don't have worries about it. But throwing like my donor information into ChatGPT, not a wise decision, not because it's going to change the model in a meaningful way, but just because that's information that shouldn't be there. And it's not your information, it's the donor's information. I think where we need to have more discussion is around obligations to stakeholders and how we represent them ethically, especially because tools like mine can quickly create testimonials of people that your organization serve. So I think it's your responsibility as nonprofit staff to go out and have those conversations to represent the people that you serve authentically. And AI shouldn't do that for you, but it can reword those interviews. It can reword those conversations. And then in a longer term, when we're talking about the data around giving and giving behavior, we need to be really mindful of how those data sets train predictive models. So how are we deciding who's a good candidate for continued giving or a different type of giving, and how are humans involved in that process? I could go a whole nother hour on that the data piece and how a lot of our data analysis in the past and with a lot of tools like RFM analysis is really problematic. I would say, like, without hyperbole, it's probably pretty racist because it's dependent upon a lot of donors in the past being white and privileged. And so when we're looking at future behavior, it's based upon whiteness and privilege. So we need to do a lot more work here, but don't feel like it's just us. It's also mortgages and credit cards and life insurance. So we have a problem as a nonprofit sector, but there are lots of other problems around how AI is used and those data sets are used. So be mindful of that. What I'll leave you with is, for all of us and everyone in your workplaces, there's a lot of repetitive work that doesn't bring us joy, that causes us burnout, that causes us to be frustrated and lose track of why we're in the sector and the impact that we're having. So if AI can help with any of that, I would encourage you to continue to explore it, see what opportunities exist for you and for your organization. And if I can be helpful, please feel free to reach out, whether it's personally on LinkedIn, or, I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes and answer any questions. But I do appreciate you and the work that you're doing. I hope that you got some rest over the break, but I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks for continuing to invest in your community.
Thank you so much. We can definitely see the passion and knowledge that you have, and really appreciate you sharing that with us today. Thank you all for being here. I will be sending out the presentation in a follow-up email with all of these links and information. So keep an eye out for that coming out this week. And again, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.